Hello everyone, welcome to Operations Management Unit number 8. In Unit number 8, we're going to talk about aggregate planning, sales, and operation. So this is very simple. This is a very simple unit which talks about of how we can forecast the sales and how we're going to cover for that demand. Okay, simple as that. So anyway, let's go through it. So in this case, we understand first of all we need to understand what kind of plans we have for the production. So we have the long range plans, which is, in this case, we're talking more about location, capacity, product, supply chain, research, and capital investment, so which is the larger scope of it. So in this case, for example, when I talk about the suppliers, I need to plan who are going to be my suppliers, the location that I'm going to be. So we're talking about here more of the backbone of the sales or so. So then we have the intermediate planning, which is forecasting and matching the production to the demand. So we usually, depends on the company, depends on the product. It could be monthly, it could be weekly, it could be yearly. It depends again. It could be, like I said, for example, when we talk about airplane production, we're talking about a yearly production, no? Not a weekly one. But when we talk about, for example, supplies for consumer goods, then we talk about a weekly one. Okay, and then of course we have the short run planning, which is intermediate plans. Like I said, it's more into the day-to-day operation, which employees we need to be there, with machines need to be running, the cost involved into the daily operation. So we have at the three levels, right? So of course they all come together, and then let's see how they start to come together and who's responsible for them. So here, for example, like I said, we have top executives are in the area of the long range plans, which, like I said, is more of the backbone. So they are the ones that mostly design the research and the R&D, new product, investments, again, location planning, etc. We have done that briefly in other units, and those are more long range plans. And then we have intermediate range plans, the operation manager, sales operations, and planning team. They are the ones forecasting how many employees we need, forecasting the sales, and how we're going to meet the supply and the demand. Okay. And then we have, of course, the operations manager, which is supervisors, but is more, like I said, at the ground level. We have the employees there, those ones that really get their hands dirty, right? So in this case, people who is more in the short term is hands-on, middle is forecasting, planning, and then of course in the top ones we talk about more strategy in general of the corporate or the company. Okay, so in this case, when we talk about the aggregate planning, it's an approach to determine the quantity and timing of production for the intermediate futures. In this case, we have to look at four things. So first of all, when we look at the aggregate planning, we need to understand the units for measuring the sales and the output, how many units we produce and how many we sell, and how we're gonna standardize those numbers, how we got to ensure that we're not talking in sales by let's say, for example, by profit, but we talk in sales of units, how many units I need to produce, or how many units or how much milliliters I need to produce, or how many the units. We need to understand that, because in the end that becomes critical to matching the supply and the demand. We have to do a forecasting for a reasonable intermediate planning period in this aggregate term. So in this case, the forecast can be electronic, can be based on previous years, it can be forecasting in terms of lead and lag time. Again, lead in terms of how long the processes has taken, and then in the lag time based on previous processes, how that's happened before. And then we have to determine a method for knowing the relevant cost, what our overhead cost, fixed cost, and overhead cost. So in this one, we have fixed costs that never change. Let's say, for example, the rental is always the same regardless we produce more or we produce less, but we have some overhead costs like electricity, labor, that will increase according to the numbers of the production. If we have to produce more, we need to spend more on that. And then we have to plan a model that combines both of them, the forecasting and the cost. So in this case, we have to understand how they come together and how we can set the right plan. Usually nowadays in operations, the operation managers seldom do this manually. This is all done by softwares. There's a whole system that forecasts this. Nowadays, like I say, in terms of technology, we even have artificial intelligence that can understand possible variations in the system and can identify them and react automatically. So very good. So when we're talking about the nature of the aggregate planning, we have to understand that we have to cover the demand. First of all, of course, that's the main goal. However, we need to constantly analyze how we can minimize the cost over the planning period. So in this case, how we can lean our system, how we can reduce waste. So that is a very critical area. So in order to do that, in order to lean a system to make sure where we can reduce waste, we have to do the disaggregation. Here, for example, I have the disaggregation of the production of these medications that I have in here. So in this case, for example, we see the different processes and where we can generate value, where we can minimize costs or reduce waste. Okay. And then, of course, for doing this disaggregation plan, also when we break down everything into small processes, then of course we also will have a master production schedule. How long it takes for this dispensing, the dry mixing, how long it takes for the wet granulation, and then of course based on that, also by breaking down how many people we need in here, what machines we need in there, what is the operational cost of just this process or this process, etc. And then of course we have all the aggregate planning, which is again, it's aggregating all the processes together in order to get the final result of how much we're going to spend or how much resources we need. So we have the aggregate planning strategies. What kind of strategies we have? So first of all, we need to play with inventory. Sometimes we need more based on the demand. Sometimes we have to produce less, or sometimes we make up for periods that perhaps are too quiet. Maybe I have a certain periods of the year that I need to produce a lot and I don't have that capacity. So maybe on the months that I have under production, maybe I will produce for those months that I cannot cope with the capacity. Also, we vary the workforce size. Again, this could be seasonal. It could be seasonal, or it can be demand or projects that we need to fulfill. So we need to hire more or less staff. Then we also have the production rates, vary the production rates. Then this is again together with inventory levels. How much I produce in some certain periods that I have more demand, and how I make up for those busy periods in the periods that I have very quiet times. This one goes together with that. With this one here, for example, I have this case here. Visually, I have it, no? So there are some periods I have a lot of demand. I can forecast that maybe, for example, in December, I will have a lot of demand because it's Christmas time, but I have in January and February, the production is very low. So maybe I will produce at this level all the year so that I can have some sufficient units for the Christmas time. Okay, very good. So also we have subcontracting. Sometimes maybe I set my production standard all year long, but I still not meeting it. So maybe I will contract another company to do that work for me. And then we also have the use of part-time workers, and that goes together also with varying the workforce size. So also we can, manipulate the demand. Okay. When, let's say, for example, we can influence the demand. When we have very low demand and we have a lot of inventory, perhaps we put up some sales, right? We can do that. On the other hand, we can also do back ordering. In order to avoid shortages, I order in advance, or I produce in advance. And also we have counter seasonal. Sometimes, again, this one, I have seasons that my products are not very well selling, so maybe on those seasons I will put special prices or bundles and see how I do it. Here I give you, for example, the case of the pepper day. That is a very good example of how they need to forecast their demand, and maybe they need to start to produce those peppers some days in advance or some weeks in advance to cope with the demand that happens only for maybe 2 or 3 days. So very good. So again, this is again, I already explained all these things, and it's just explain some of the advantages of disadvantages of doing those things. This one I will recommend you that you go slowly into that. I already mentioned what they are and what are the process of them, and then what happens. No, mostly the disadvantages, of course, is in general. Let me just brief you just generally about this one. Playing with the aggregate planning and varying it, of course, has good impacts in general. But also, when we say, let's say, for example, we have part-time workers, maybe we have employees that are not knowledgeable, subcontracting, we have companies that perhaps are not up to the standard of the quality that we have. Back ordering, perhaps we forecasted more and the demand didn't come up. Sometimes it doesn't happen. So those are some of the problems that we have in there. And that goes together, of course, with like I said, the chase strategy. We have this one again. Part of the strategy is the chase strategy, which is we will always try to fill the demand, right? We will, whatever is the demand, we don't have any less, we don't have any more. We just cover the demand. We chase the demand, and that's it. We have, again, the level scheduling, which I was telling you here in this one. This is a level scheduling, which is pretty much producing more when we have less and less when we have more. Then again, we have the mixed strategy, which is using the two of them. Sometimes we level, sometimes we chase the demand. So in this case, for these methods of the aggregate planning, we usually use graphical techniques. Nowadays, the software that we have in terms of aggregate planning is very visual. We have dashboards, and let me show you a little bit of that. So here I added how, for example, these new softwares have dashboards with a lot of graphical information that tell us how much purchases we have, the revenue, etc., the cost, etc. It could be in many areas. It can be in terms of the production, in terms of the energy, in terms of the cost, etc. So again, we have this forecasting. No? Here, for example, you can see a very relevant when I put the COVID-19 vaccine market by region. How is the forecast, and then of course how it's gonna go, and which areas or regions we need to focus on. Right? Very good. So this is precisely what we call this the transportation method. So in the transportation method, like I was saying here, we will level the production, which is on some months I have less, some months I have more demand. So what I have to do is, in this month, even though I don't have that demand, I produce more to cover up for these months. Problem is whether I can hold inventory or not. That is the biggest issue in here, which is where I store it. Not all the companies have that, right? So in this case, like I said, we use a unused capacity and carry it forward for other periods. Here you can see it graphically how I'm gonna use it. For example, in some periods I have, like for example here, the demand of 1,000, and then I'm gonna carry maybe those 200 unused to the next period, okay, and so on. We have period 1, 2, 3. This one we're not gonna do it in class, not because it's not useful, but because it's already done all electronically. So it's not, I don't say it's not a good tool anymore, but I'm showing you how it works manually. Good. So now we have the aggregate planning and services. Production, when it comes to tangible products, is aggregate planning is much easier to forecast. The problem comes with the services. Services, once we don't use them, they cannot be used again. That means that if I don't use a hotel room today, it's gone. So we need to understand that. We need to plan in advance. So how we do that in this case? We do, first of all, the accurate scheduling of labor hours. When it comes to services, scheduling of employees is very critical, because maybe in some seasons, maybe it's lesser, so maybe I have to plan it accordingly. We have also an on-call labor resource. Maybe I have already, maybe for peak season. Here I put one great example of, for example, the ski season. They have a lot of students that come and work for the ski resort. Then also we have I have to make sure, when it comes to service, especially, for example, in this ski resort example, we have the flexibility of individual workers. They know how to do cashier, they know how to ski, they know how to do 3-4 things, so they can be in different areas of the operation. And then, of course, we have flexibility in rate of output. So in this case, also, my employees need to be flexible when I need them. I need you to work more hours, less hours, etc. So in this case, I also need them to be flexible in that sense. Okay. So in this case, we talk mostly about the revenue or yield management. So it is capacity decisions that determine the allocation of resources to maximize revenue. So like I was saying, when it comes to services or products can be sold in advance. That strategy works very well. Here, for example, I give a product example of pre-selling. Xbox and PlayStation, they are selling in advance already some of their units, so that they can comply with the demand. They know already how much they can produce, and they already sell it in advance. The same thing for ski resorts. Here we see, for example, 4 days, 3 nights, half of the price. Why they do that? So that they can secure the numbers, right? So in this case, we have to, especially when it comes to services, it comes to selling in advance, so that at least we can cover our cost, right? This one goes, like, for example, you book a ticket for an airline, and you realize that in the beginning it's very cheap. So yeah, in the beginning it's very cheap. Is while I fill the airplane to a point that I cover my cost, then after that I can sell it at double the price. You will pay for it because you need it, because the time is on you, and then I still can profit out of you, and I already have covered my cost. Even if I don't sell that at that price because it's too high for you, I already cover my costs. All right. So again, in this case, for this revenue management to work, we have to manage 3 issues. So first of all, we have the multiple pricing structures. Like I said, for the airplane, we have different prices. For skiing, here I have the Disneyland resort ticket options. There's variation of prices. Some of there's different combinations and permutations that let you have the optimal prices and make sure that you offer value to the consumer, and that also they feel your capacity. So we have to do the forecast, again, of the seasons, of the time, the use, and the demand. And then, of course, we need to understand if there's any changes in the demand. Now is a very critical time for COVID-19, which we have theme parks, not being able to forecast their operation, because this has never happened before, and that's very critical for many companies right now, that they are working with new numbers, so they don't know what to expect. Very good. So now, and that goes together, like I said, with this one, the pricing structures, or what we call nowadays dynamic pricing. This is becoming often more used because of the software that we have. Previously, changing the prices of the things was very difficult, because we literally manually had to change the prices. But nowadays, because of the software, we can do a lot of fluctuations of the prices, calculate the cost very quickly, and then see whether reducing our prices or increasing our prices, it's a good idea based on the demand and the supply. Here, for example, we have an example of hotel sets and how that works in the real life. We have when hotel sets only one price level. Previous time, like I said, companies had a lot of difficulties in setting multiple prices, because it was very difficult to calculate the revenue over periods of time. So nowadays I can change them. The software is 2 clicks. I can forecast whether it's profit or is a loss and whether the demand covers, etc. So here, for example, you have to do this in your assignment. So first of all, you have, for example, 150 cost per room. So this is the price, which is 150. All the rooms cost 150 minus 15, which is the cost, which is a variable cost of 15. Here, that's it. And then we have 50 rooms, right? So in this case, we multiply it. And this is when I have all the rooms, 50 rooms, $6,750. Okay. So problem is that some customers who paid 150 were actually willing to pay more for the room. So it's money that is left on the table. And the same thing, potential customers exist who are willing to pay more than the 15 variable cost of the room, but not 150. So we have here a scale that we have money lost because there's people willing to pay more. Maybe if you say in a hotel, for example, in this case, we can say customer came on a very last minute. So yeah, they are willing to pay more than 150. There's no rooms right now, so I will pay 200. So in this case, we are missing on that, right? So for that matter, we can set a variable price. So in this case, for example, we say we have rooms that will be at the cost of 100, and then there will be rooms at the cost of 200. Okay, so in this case, when we change that changes automatically. So we have 100 minus the cost, which is 15, times 30 rooms, and then we have 200 minus 15 is 30 rooms. So we have also the same thing. We have here, we only sold 50 rooms, right? Because maybe some people didn't want to purchase that. And then we have here, for example, that we will have more money out of a strategy of dynamic pricing, different prices for different people for different needs. Some people want to book in advance for 100, some people last minute for 200. Okay, so that is precisely revenue management. You have to do it in your assignment of this week. Okay, very good. So that's all for today. So if you have any questions, please let me know, and then I will see you next week. Thank you so much.